Okay. Kum Len of Makamura, we are up to the Dalid Amid Aleph. About 12 or 13 lines on top of the page. Amar Rab Shmuel Bar Nachmani. Amar Rab Yonasan. Rab Shmuel, the son of Nachmani, said, name Rab Yonasan. Shloisha Shalu Shaloi Kahagin. 3 people asked from Hashem in not properly. And Yilishnaim Heshu to them were fortunate that it was responded to correctly. One of them did not make out so well. Who are they? Eloheim. Eliezer Eved Avram, Eliezer Avram's servant. We'll soon see what exactly he was that he's asked. Bishol ben Kish and Yiftach Hagilodi. Eliezer Avram, the Chsiv says, that girl that I would tell. Hatin no kadech. Why don't you tilt forward your jug and then give me to drink and so on, and then I'll see, her generosity of spirit and so on. Now, what's wrong with that kind of a question? Because he made like a promise. If she does that, then she will be the prospective shidduch. But Yocho, what happened to Phil Chigeda? She could have been limping. Afil Summa could have been blind, and you'll be stuck. Tesha already asked, what do you mean? He would see if she's limping or she's blind, and he won't approach her. Remember, he said, whoever I approach and I ask, because he'll see this girl that is blind, she won't approach. So he says, sometimes it might have a wooden leg and it's completely covered by her robes. Or let's say she's blind, but she knows her way, and she's looking at her eyes, you're never able to tell. So therefore, it's an inappropriate way of making a neder. You're really relying a lot on good fortune. And Heshivuk was answered properly. And Rivka. And fortunately, it was Rivka, the girl that fronted up. Another example is Shol ben Kish. It says, talks about Goliath. And he said that person who will smite Goliath, Ish Asher Yakenu, Yashrenu Hamelech Isha, God will give abundant amount of wealth, as Bite Yitle, and my daughter will be given over to this hero. Nu Yochel Afil Ever could have been a servant, Afil a Mamzer. What happens if this person, this warrior, happened to turn out to be a Mamzer? Is not allowed to marry your daughter. And yet, fortunately, Heshiva Kohagin ended up being David Melech. Even though I don't know how Kohagin it was, because Shaul and David had major clashes, but nevertheless, it was a tzaddik, David HaMelech. Tesha already asked, so why did you say something about Eliezer? That, a girl would come forward, and then we turn out to be the Shiva Shivcha. Could be turn out to be she was a Mamzeres. So why isn't that included? So he says, because first of all, it was before Matan Torah. So it was before Matan Torah. So according to Tosfos, he brings the name of Rashi. We don't have Rashi here. According to Tosfos, they did not keep the laws of Arayas or Mamzeres before Matan Torah. Even though the Gemara we learned in Yuma says that Avraham Avinu and the others kept the entire Torah before Matan Torah was given. So how can you say that Mamzeres didn't count? So the Mepharshim say, according to Rashi, they kept the entire Torah except the laws of Arayas, and that's why Yaakov married 2 sisters, because the laws of Arayas they didn't keep. So Mamzeres wouldn't have disturbed them. That gives another answer, which is even more parallel, like Shagazai says he doesn't understand. Tosfos says when it comes to a woman, we care more about how beautiful she is than her status and everything else about her, which is very odd. Is that what the others were looking for? Avram was sent to Eliezer to find a wife appropriate for Yitzchak, not B'nai Canaan. He didn't want somebody who didn't care about prettiness, care about inner beauty. But that's what Tosfos says. Anyway. Or we can answer, like some people say, that in Bnei Canaan, maybe he went to a particular place, and over there they didn't go to Bnei Canaan, they went to the family area, and they knew there were no mamzeres there, and they knew there was no shivchas there. Anyway, the Gemara continues. What was the third example? Yiftach HaGiladi. Third example, Yiftach HaGiladi. And there, Yiftach HaGiladi made the following vow. He said, that person, actually was thinking it was an animal, that will come out of the door of my house. The cross towards me, B'shuvi, B'sholom, Beis Ammon, if you have a war with Ammon, if I'm successful, and I come back triumphant, the first thing that comes out of my house, I will bring it up to Hashem as an oil, etc. I'm just reading the entire pasuk. In other words, he made a promise without specifying. Yochel could have been a field of time. What happened if a chazer would have come out? And what happened even worse? Hey, Shiva Shalei Kohagin, who came out and his his daughter came out of his house. And what happened was that Yiftach did not in any way annul his vow, and there's a big machlekes in Mefarshim. Did he actually kill his daughter? And the daughter said to his father, "You got to keep your promise." Did he kill his daughter, or did he? What do you call it? Did she live in isolation? Was she banished? Did she deprive herself of things to live a life like a carbon the rest of her life? Behind the Navi said to the Eden, Hatzari ain't be Gilad. Yirmiyah said, there's no tzari, there's no spice tzari in Gilad. Im Roife ain't sham, there's no doctor. What do you mean there's no doctor? The doctor was Pinchas. Pinchas was there at the time, the Kohen Gadol. He could have annulled the neder, and yet it didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Because Yiftach said, I'm the Shofet, let him come to me. And Pinchas said, I'm the Kohen Gadol and the Navi, let him come to me. And Pinchas actually was punished as a result of this, and Yiftach lost his daughter. So because of their guidance. But that was not, and there is an example that they didn't ask responsibly, and they were not responded to accordingly. So you went further. See, it says over there also, the Abishah says, I didn't want such a kind of a carbon, because Lahavdil, by other religions, they used to sacrifice children and living sacrifices to their gods. And the Abishah said, by me, this doesn't count, doesn't work by me. He says here, they were building these bombs over there to sacrifice their children of fire. I never instructed, like the Barti, I never said, never entered my conscience. Hashem says this idea of human sacrifices is unheard of. It's antithetical to everything Yiddishkeit stands for. So what are the three examples? The king of Moab wanted to appease Hashem, so he brought up his child as a sacrifice, thinking that would appease Hashem. He took his son, the older son, who was supposed to assume the mantle of the monarch that he brought up as Oila to the Eibush, to appease the Eibush. Lloyd did Barti, I never said the Yiftach. What Yiftach did, I never said. He could have. All he had to do was go and appeal to Yiftach to annul his neder. Also, I never entered my mind. What was Hashem referring to there? The Yitzchak ben Abraham. Even though I made the Akedah, I never was planned. It was never planned for Yitzchak to be brought up as a sacrifice. Amar Abrachid is another example. Av Knesset Yisrael Shalosh Lo Kohen. Because he didn't ask incorrectly, and the Eibush responded correctly. It says in the pasuk, the Neda near the Neda, let us know. Near the Ladaz Hashem, let us run after the knowledge and try to understand Hashem. B'shachar Nochen Mitzoi, he goes b'shachar in the morning. He goes out. And Yavai Kageshem London comes to us like rain. What does that mean? Amalai, so the Eden are asking the Eibush to please come down to us like rain, and we'll have a relationship. Amalai, you're asking me to be like rain. Rain is not always good. In the right seasons, it's fantastic. We learned before, if it comes in the summer, it's a terrible thing. I'll always be something you'll always need. And it says, be like dew. We learned before, dew is constant and it's essential. Another instance where the Eden asked for something that was not really appropriate or correct. Amr from the Bnei Shalom said, why don't you why don't you make places like a seal on your heart, like a seal on your arm? You're asking something. If I'm wearing a hat, if I'm wearing clothes, you won't see what's on my arm. And you won't see, you won't see what's on my heart, won't see my arm. My heart is always covered, my clothes, my arm is covered, you won't see it. I'll make you in a way that there's always visible our relationship. It says, I'll place you on my arm, on my hand, the bottom of my hand there, my palm, and there everybody can see, it's very visible, very visible. Taste already brings, why doesn't we also bring by color? Colleague said, whoever will beat this, what do you call it, Kiryas Sefer, and conquer it, I will give my daughter as a wife. And why doesn't ask that question there? Could have been a mamzer, could have been an eved. The Tosfos, two answers. One answer is there. He wasn't talking about a physical city of conquering. Theirs was, he's talking about they forgot all the laws they found certain thousands of laws that Moshe Rabbeinu said, and whoever can conquer it and bring it back, he called Kiryas Sefer, whoever can bring back these laws will get my daughter. Anybody who has zeich to have that, obviously, is a big tzaddik in Ruach Kodesh. Nevish will not rest Ruach Kodesh on a mamzer or an eved. So therefore, that in itself tells us that this person is worthy of being the husband of my daughter. And Tezan brings another answer that his daughter Achsa, why is it Achsa? Because any woman who saw her got very upset. She was very worried, not because necessarily she was so beautiful, she was, but more so because she was very modest, very tznizik. And because she was so tznizik, Kala felt that it was not only his schus, it's also his daughter's schus. She was very special, that they will get the right husband who come along. Okay, it says further back to the rain, ain't shoiling as akshalim. It says in the Mishnah. Actually, Shagzai points out that the Mishnah is very odd. It talks about remembering, then it talks about asking, and then it goes back to remembering. So in the middle of the Mishnah, after you had the argument of Abelezer, who says that you begin to be zoich, you say Mashav Ruach Mer Geshem, he says from the beginning of Sukkot, versus Rabbi Shua says we do it by Shmini Atzeres. Then it says in the Mishnah, Ein Shoylin Es Akshamim, we don't ask for rain, only by the rain season. And then it goes back. Rabbi Yehuda says that you start Mashav Ruach Shmini Atzeres and you finish it by Shachris of Pesach. So the fact that the Mishnah could be the fact that the Mishnah throws in Shaila, which is in Baruch Lein, Bracha Baruch Lein, we say the same Talmud of Bracha, right in between the two parts of the Mishnah talk about Mashav Ruach. So the Gemara right now will think that Zechira and Sheila are really the same din. And that's why the Mishnah is not really going back and forth, it's all the same. And based on that premise, the Gemara can ask a few questions, and the Gemara keeps on asking the same question, thinking that that's the same. And the only possible reason why the Gemara keeps on thinking it's the same is from the structure of our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Savru, we thought Shaila Vaskar Chadimilsi asking for rain, Saint Talmud Rocha and Mashurah, they both come in together in tandem. So Man Tana, and here it says in the Mishnah that when should you be asking for rain? Around the rain season. So that means also Zechira is around the rain season. So who is it? Mantana. Who is that? It can't be Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer holds you start asking the beginning of Sukkot, which is not really the rain season. Rain season is right after Sukkot. So it's not Rabbi Lezer. So Mantana, Omar, it must be Rabbi Shui. Must be Rabbi Shui. It says he begins saying Mashav Ruach at the end of Sukkot, and that's when you start saying we're saying Talamot Ruach. He says that when you start saying, or Rabbi Shui the Rais says you start saying after you put the lulav down, and this Rashi here says it means the 8th day, Shmini Atzeres, which is very odd. All the Rashis we learned before, where Rashi clearly says it's on the 7th day itself. So that's a problem that unfortunately talk about. Anyway, Amalei Abai says, who said, I feel damn Rabbi Lezer. Why can't it be Rabbi Lezer who says that you say Mashav Ruach beginning of Sukkot? What in the world does Mashav Ruach have to do with Saint Talmud? You can start mentioning Mashav Ruach and Mordei Geshem before you're actually going to start asking for rain, which is what we do anyway. Because first you have to praise the Eibishter that he's the one who does it, and then when the right time comes, we're going to ask him for it. You have to build up. That's one version. The Rabbi asked, and Abaye argued. Another version, it was Rabbi himself who said, "We on the other say, Lema." The Gemara is asking, "Lema, let us say Rabbi Shuhi. Let us say the one who says that you say Mashav Ruach and Saint Talmud at the same time. You commence at the same time. That followed Rabbi Shuhi. Amma Mishas and Chassid from Shmini Atzeres. Amma Rabbi Filtei Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi is the one who says even Rabbi Lezer. Shai L'chud Vaskar L'chud. Two separate things. Rabbi Yehuda says, Yehuda says in the Mishnah, the one who goes for Shmini Atzeres by Musaf is the one who says it, who starts, right? Whoever starts with Shmini Atzeres is the one who starts it by Musaf, and then the Shachris is the last person to say on Pesach, and then by Musaf you start Moed Hatol. Says if you say Moed Hatol, says the Gemara. When we ask the question, it says the same Rabbi Yehuda said, Ad Mosai Shoylin Es Akshamim. Till when do you ask for rain? Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ad Shiyavar HaPesach. And Rabbi Meir Omer Ad Shiyavar Nisan. Rabbi Meir says the entire Nisan you still continue asking for rain. And Rabbi Yehuda says the entire Pesach you continue asking for rain. So how can Rabbi Yehuda say in our Mishnah that come Shmini, come first day Pesach, he stops saying at all Mashav Ruach or that, when here he says Shaila, and again, the Gemara thinks that Shaila asking and mentioning is exactly the same thing. And again, why Gemara thinks so? Because our Mishnah puts them all together, bunches them all together, and goes back and forth. So it's really the same halacha. So how could Rabbi Yehuda Mishnah say that we stop mentioning the first day Pesach when here he says that you ask, which the Chayim mentioned the same thing to the very end of Pesach? And they don't gel. Again, Kan Lisha, Kan Lahaska, separate the two. Mentioning, you mention only till the first day Pesach by till the end of Shachris, but asking, you continue asking Chalamayda till the end of Pesach. Says the Gemara, that doesn't make sense. So sorry, before we get to that, Mishal Shoyel V'Azul, asking, you continue asking till the end of Pesach, or B'Lahaske B'Yom Tov Rishon Pasik. But to mention the first day Yom Tov, you have to, that's when you stop. Amarul, Ravula said, what Rav Chizah just said absolutely doesn't make sense in logic. Kashi is so difficult to understand. Like vinegar to teeth, which is horrible. Like smoke for your eye, which is bad for you. Doesn't make sense. When it comes to Sukkot, we don't ask until after Sukkot. Yet we already mentioned maskeh. In other words, maskeh takes place before you're doing Sheila. So the Mokum Sheshoyel, so it comes, you tell me Chalamayid Pesach, you continue asking, so surely you should continue saying Mashu Ruach. What's the logic that when it comes to the ending, it's Mashu Ruach, you stop the first day Pesach, but to the same Talmud, Matla Ruach, you continue till the end of Pesach. Elamarula says, Ula must be Trei Tanoi Elibad Rabbi Yehuda, the two views as to what Rabbi Yehuda actually said. And that's the Machlek you said. Whether Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's the end of Pesach, everything, or whether it's the beginning of Pesach, everything. Rabbi Yosef comes along and says, no, very interesting. Rabbi Yosef comes and gives an answer, and then his colleague Rabbah comes and gives an answer, and they both share the same student called Abaye. Abaye does not allow any of them to get away with it, and you will attack them both. First, Rabbi Yosef comes along and says, you misunderstood Rabbi Yehuda. You think Yavar HaPesach means to the end of Pesach, and therefore you have a problem, because here he says the first day Pesach is at the end. My Ad Sheyavar HaPesach, you know what it means? Ad Sheyavar HaPesach? Ad Sheyavar Shliach Tzibur Rishon HaYoyed B'Yom Tov Rishon Pesach. It means till after the first tefillah of Pesach. The end of the first tefillah of Pesach, you stop asking for rain. That's what it means. And we're talking about asking. And the reason why the Gemara Chatchil didn't say that is because who asks on Yom Tov? You don't say Baruch Aleinu on Yom Tov. If anything is before Yom Tov, you stop. Yet the word is Yavar Pesach, and you, Rabbi Yosef, want to say, you know what it means? Yavar Pesach. It means until after the first tefillah, the Shachar Shachris of Pesach. So therefore, it conforms with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah talks about Mashuruach. He stopped after Shachris, and here it talks about Baruch Aleinu, which is saying Talmud Bracha. It talks about after Shachris. Abai says to his Rebbe Rabbi Yosef, Shaila b'Yom Tov Me'ika. What are you talking about? Who says we're saying Talmud Bracha on Yom Tov? It's unheard of. Amalei. So Rabbi Yosef is not the third. And he says here, yes, Shoyel Meturgimen, that if there's a drasha in the morning of Pesach between Shachris and Musaf, like all the shuls give drashas, so the Meturgim himself would then, in the middle of his drasha, ask the same Talmud Bracha. So that's what we're saying here, that you have to stop. After Shachris and Pesach, it stops. Says the Gemara, V'chim Mitzvabaya asked back to his teacher, what are you talking about? V'chim Meturgimen Shoyel Dover. I understand. If you tell me that he's telling me that what he's coming to tell the Meturgiman to stop, why would the Meturgiman say in the first place? Would the Meturgiman ask for something that is not necessary at all, is unnecessary? That you don't have to tell me anything about it. In other words, you're telling me that the Yehuda coming along and saying that when he said here, you stop saying the same Talmud Bracha the first day Shachris, he's telling the Meturgiman to stop saying it. Of course, you stop saying it. We're not going to say it in davening anymore. Why would he say it? Why would he have something that's totally unnecessary? So therefore, Abai says to Rabbi Yosef, your answer is no good. Ashiyavar Pesach cannot, Taka means the very end of Pesach, and you must answer back like Ula said. The two Tanoim arguing what Rabbi Yehuda said. He said to the end of Pesach, he said the end of Shachris, of the first day Pesach. Rabba says, you know what, I'm going to learn like Rabbi Yosef. I'm going to try to say it's not two Tanoim, because it's not nice to say, it's not a good idea to say two Tanoim, you have a choice, to argue about one particular person of Yehuda, what he actually said. But I'm going to give another interpretation of what he meant when he says Achiyavar Pesach. Achiyavar Zman Shchutas Pesach. He meant when the time of shechting the Pesach is over, When that time is over, that's when you stop saying the same time, which is the weekday, and there you daven normal shmones, you say Baruch Aleinu. That's when you stop saying the same Talam Matul Lebrach. Says the Gemara, Ut Chilase came a sefer. Just like in the beginning, you ask only after you start after Sukkot to start asking. So to the end, you stop asking before you stop mentioning. Now, when you stop mentioning, we said before, Shachris of Pesach, the first one, and over here you stop mentioning is by Mincha of Erev Yom Tov Pesach. Okay, so now it's perfect. We're talking about the weekday. Everything makes sense. So when he says Yamar Pesach, it means Erev Pesach when you finish this man shchita. Says the Gemara, Uchilase can say, then Mat Chilase Masket. He mentions on Sukkot. He doesn't ask until after Sukkot. Av Seifer. So to the end, Masket. He mentions on the first day of Pesach. He stopped asking already at Pesach. He continued reminding Mashiv Ruach Merigeshem till after Shachris. Abaye says to Rabbi, I'm sorry, but what you say doesn't make any more sense what my other Rebbe said. Yosef. In the beginning, it makes sense why we're already saying Mashiv Ruach, even though we're not saying Yevah Saint Talamot, because you have to appease the Eibishter, you have to make him feel good, and then you'll ask him for whatever brachas. But once you finished asking him, why we're continuing saying Mashiv Ruach? The whole purpose of mentioning is to prepare the Eibishter for our question. Once you finished asking for rain, the rain season is over. If at a pace of the rain season is over, why are we continuing for Yom Tov by night? Shachar in the morning, continuing saying. We go back to the answer of Ula. We go back to what Ula said. What a Tutanoim according to Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, yeah. Halach is actually like Rabbi Yehuda. Halach is like Rabbi Yehuda. That it's the Shachris, that it's Musaf of Shmini Atzeres, we start saying it. Again, the Gemara is going to assume that Shaila and Schira is the exact same thing. And again, what's driving the Gemara to say that is the construct of our Mishnah. The construct of our Mishnah, where the Mishnah talks about Zechira, then talks about Sheila, and then it goes back to Zechira. Let me ask a question. You're telling me that Allah Rabbi Yehuda that Shmini Atzeres by Musaf, you start saying, you don't say anymore. But now we learned the third day of Cheshvan is when you start in Eretz we'll see later. You start asking for rain, and I'm going to be the seventh day. And Abba Lazar said the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel. Abba Lazar was a Talmud of Rabbi Yechon, so it's not just Talmud of Amayda, it's a Talmud of Rabbi Yechon, and he's a halacha like Gamliel, which is the seventh day of Cheshvan. So how can you say halacha like Rabbi Yehuda? How can I be that we start Shmini Atzeres as Zechira when Sheila starts the 7th day of Cheshvan and Lechayda Zechira Sheila the same? Amalek said to him first of all, Gavra Koramet, even though that Rabbi Lazar was a Talmud of Rabbi Yechon, it doesn't necessarily mean that Rabbi Yechon has to agree with him. So can I ask a question? So Rabbi Lazar argues Rabbi Yechon in this regard. Or Ibai say Malakasha again, Kan Lisho Kan Lahaske. The Gemara that's why the Gemara keeps on thinking that Sheila and Zechira is the same thing because of our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, but Rabbi Yechon, I still have a problem. Rabbi Yechon, and you're telling me Rabbi Yechon, what Shmini Atzeres. We stop Shach. This is the end. Well, Rabbi Yechon said, whenever you're asking, that's when you mention, and when you don't ask, you don't mention. So how can you say that on Shmini Atzeres by Shachris you stop mentioning it and you're saying you still mention it on Shmini Atzeres, but Shachris is the last one. L'chayda, he made a rule that you only say Mashiv Ruach whenever you say Talamata. And since we don't say Talamata till later, till the 7th day of Cheshvan, how can you start saying Mashiv Ruach on Shmini Atzeres? Ahu lahavsaki itmar. That's talking about when you stop. When you stop asking, which is Erev Pesach, that's also when you stop saying Mashiv Ruach. You also stop saying Mashiv Ruach. But starting, you can start saying Mashiv Ruach Hashmini Atzeres, and you don't say Talmud Bracha till Zayin Cheshvan or till later. It says in Rabbi Yechon said, as soon as you start saying Mashiv Ruach, Maschil Lishol, you start saying straight away with saying Talamotor, and Posib Melishol, as soon as you stop saying Talamotor, Posib Melahaska, you stop saying Mashiv Ruach. Like kasha, it's not a problem. Holon v'holahu. It's a difference if you're in Eretz or if you are in Bavel. Now, what's the difference between Eretz and Bavel? As we'll say, in Bavel, we're not going to say till later. You don't even start being masked until Zayin Cheshvan. And at Yisrael, you start being masked on Sukkot. What's the difference? Maishno already done. The Islam paid a bedabra. So by us in Bavel, they take the fruits out to dry. They don't have places in the city. They will go out in the fields and put the fruits, they spread the fruits to dry, and then they have to travel to the fields to bring them back. So they need more time after Sukkot. So we give them time till Zayin Cheshvan. We'll give them later time. So therefore, you don't even mention until Zayin Cheshvan. And at the same time, you also start saying the same Talmud of Bracha. Because Rabbi Yechon holds maschil haskir, maschil lishol. They're both at the same time. So in Bavel, you start asking the same Talmud in Cheshvan because you need time to go to the field to bring back all your fruits to dry. So therefore, you also don't start mentioning Mashiruch also till then. However, Maishal on Islam paid a bit dabra because we have fruits out in the wilderness. In Eretz Yisrael, Taste explained that Israel, they don't have to take it out in the fields to dry. It's very hot everywhere. They can leave it where it is. So therefore, for them, they can start being masked straight away. The Shemini Atzeres and onwards, and they start saying already Mashiruch. Says the Gemara, but there's another reason why Israel should delay. And according to Rabbi Yechon, since you don't ask till later, you also don't mention. And what's the reason for them to delay? What about the people who went to Eilei Regel and have to go back home, and you don't want them to get caught in the heavy rains? So therefore, just like in Bavel, we delay till Zayin Cheshvan, the Sheila, so to the Schira, so to the social, the same thing. Says the Gemara, Ki ka'amar Rabbi Yechon b'zman she'ein beis hamikdash kaim. We're talking about Eretz Yisrael when there's no beis hamikdash. If there's no beis hamikdash, so then you don't have to wait. Then halacha like Rabbi Yehuda, you start with Shmini Atzeres, you start saying Mashav Ruach, and right after Sukkot, you start saying Saint Talmud Levrach. And but while the beis hamikdash is standing, you're right. They would wait in Eretz just like in Bavel until Zayin Cheshvan, and they wouldn't start saying Mashav Ruach either till Zayin Cheshvan. The halacha then would not be like Rabbi Yehuda. Says now that you do this new variable here about a beis hamikdash, so I can have to go to Bavel. Even to Eretz Yisrael. Sometimes Eretz Yisrael started Zayin Cheshvan, the Sheila and the Schira, and sometimes they started straight after Sukkot. And how's it work? Come this man to beis hamikdash kind. They would wait for Zayin Cheshvan to start saying Talmud Rocha. They would also say Mashiach then. Come this man ain't beis hamikdash kind. The beis hamikdash is not existing. Says the Gemara. Now, what about us in Chutzlarts? The Islam today, we who have 2 days Shmini Atzeres. Each one's a Sveik of the Yom. Maybe it's Shmini Atzeres, but maybe it's still Chalamoid Zayin. So what do we do about Mashiach and Merigesh? Hey, Abdinan, what do we do? Do we start Shmini Atzeres, but maybe it's the 7th day and then start again? What do we do? Remember, Rabbi Yehuda says that on Shmini Atzeres, Musaf is when you begin. So what do we do? So have an interesting way of looking at it. The Gemara says as follows. Rav says, Maschil b'musafin. By Musaf, you say Mashiv Ruach. Poisib b'mincha. By Mincha, you don't say it again because maybe it's the 7th day. It's before the season. And you don't say b'mincha Arvis b'shachris. And then the Choyzim b'musafin. On the 9th day, Simchas Torah could be the Shemini Atzeres. You start again Musaf and then you continue. Amal Shmuel says, Puku, go out, go out and tell my dear friend Abba, or his name might have been Abba. And we just call him Abba as a title. Tell him, you're telling me that within the day of Shmini Atzeres, we say the same Kalamot Levracha on by Musaf. Nobody's saying it's probably Shmini Atzeres. And then by Mincha, you revert back to say that it's a weekday. The very same day you're playing around. You're saying part of the day you Shmini Atzeres, part of the day weekday. How can it be? Part of the day is Kodesh and part of the day is Chol. After you treat a Musaf as if it's Shmini Atzeres, and you started saying to say Talmud Rocha Tasei Chol, then Mincha you say, oh, maybe it's still Chol. Let's go back and say it doesn't make sense. Elosh was a Shmuel. Maschil b'musafin uve Mincha. This is what you do. Musaf, once you say by Musaf Masharuach, by Minchas you say Masharuach, for the rest of the day you treat like it's Shmini Atzeres. Now the night you're starting again. So now at night you're saying, oh, maybe tonight is Shmini Atzeres. So Ma'iliv and Shachar you don't say it, and by Musaf you say the following day. Upoisik Arvis v'Shachris, you don't say Arvis Shachris, but Choyzim Mas Musaf, you start again by Musaf. Says the Gemara, Rava says no. Once by Shmini Atzeres, you started by Musaf saying the same Talmud Rocha, you don't stop. And the Rav Shesha says Once you started, you don't stop. For Rav, even Rav himself changed his mind. Rav who said you just do by Musaf, and then Mincha you go back revert to Cholamah. He changed his mind. You count 21 days from Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Usually we have 2 days of Chodesh. We always say the second day of Chodesh is the right one. When it comes to Rosh Hashanah, we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. It's the first day that's the right one, because we said that El generally is never more than 29 days. So the first day is the right one. The only reason why we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah is because the Gezeidah Eidim will come after Mincha, and so therefore we won't accept the Eidah till the following day. But nevertheless, we tell everybody that today. We still have to keep it like Rosh Hashanah, but when it comes to calculating Yom Kippur, you start from the second day. But otherwise, it's usually the first day. So therefore, when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, you count 21 days. 22nd day is Shmini Atzeres, and that's it. And that's how we calculate. Especially today, it's meaning I was saying to the Yadenu that we have 2 days Yom Tov. We really know that the first day Yom Tov is the correct one. So once by Shmini Atzeres we start saying Mashiv Ruach B'Radi Geshem, we continue that way. The Kimish Hischel Shuvei the Paisik. But when it comes to Seital Mavracha, it's totally different. As we'll see later, Zayin Cheshvan, 60 days after the new season. The Hilchot Halacha is Kimish Hischel Shuvei the Paisik. When you start, you don't stop. Okay, we'll continue here, Mitzvah Shem. Sorry, we'll leave it here and continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem.
Thank you.